My name is Chris Pleasant, and today we're going to do some hands-on skill sets that you can use to manage a person in shock. Like from our lecture, please remember that shock is pretty much just poor tissue perfusion. The cells aren't getting enough oxygen or insulin to maintain homeostasis or a prime functioning state, and therefore they go into a system of anaerobic respiration, which leads to inefficient cellular metabolism and eventually cell death. Tissues are made of cells, so when the cells dies, the tissue dies. Bodies are made of tissues, so when the tissue dies, the body dies. So as EMTs, our goal is to stop this cascade of events from poor tissue perfusion to shift to anaerobic respirations to cellular death. And today we're going over some steps to mitigate those things. We'll also go over like the 4 types of shock: hemorrhagic shock, cardiogenic shock, distributive shock, and obstructive shock, and give you specific techniques to help you manage the patient and give them the best chance of survival to the hospital. Please follow along with the handout that I gave today. This breaks down kind of A, B, C, D steps to manage your patient in shock. The first thing we do with any patient is make sure the scene is safe. No biohazards, no fire, look out for cars and whatnot. We'll put on our PPE. Today I'm going to forego gloves because of the type of mannequin that I'm using today. As we approach the patient and view the scene, we're doing our initial assessment. We look for, is this a trauma patient? Are there mechanisms of injury? Or do we believe this is a medical patient? And what signs and symptoms make us think this person is having a medical emergency? As we look up, we're going to look at the patient. Is the patient alert? Are they reactive to the surroundings around them? Their work of breathing. Are they breathing at all? Are they breathing fast? Can you hear something from their lungs as you approach them? And then we're going to look at their skin. Is it pale? Is it blue? Are they sweaty at all? So these are going to give us indications the state of the patient's homeostasis. The first thing we need to do is control any bleeding. Perfusion relies on blood getting to the tissues. So if blood is leaking on the floor or onto the ground, it's not getting to the tissues. And no matter what else we do, we are behind the 8 ball. The patient is not going to have a good outcome. So the first steps to control bleeding is direct pressure. We're going to pretend that Bob, our mannequin, has a wound right here on his thigh. We see a wound, it is bleeding profusely. First thing we do is put our hand right on that wound and squeeze. Not lightly, we press hard as we can. Full force against the bone. While we're doing that, our partner or someone else is going to bring us some bandages or gauze. We're going to put that right on the wound, and then we are going to press down again. After a couple of minutes, if the gauze is totally soaked, we can add another bandage of gauze right on top of the Owen. Don't remove the Owen, and keep pressing. At this time, we may need to fix the bulky dressing to the patient, so we can just use some sort of bandage, wrap it around the extremity, and tie it in place, very tight. If the bleeding is anywhere on the body, we'll use this technique: torso, back, abdomen, direct pressure, bulky dressings. If there's uncontrolled bleeding on an extremity, then we can move on to a tourniquet situation. Can't use tourniquets on larger areas of the body. Again, we'll say that Bob has a laceration right above his knee. We'll take our tourniquet and apply it a couple inches above the wound. Usually I go about a hand's width above the wound. Every tourniquet's a little bit different, so make sure you're familiar with the one that's in your ambulance or that your system uses. But most of them wrap around, make sure it's a couple of inches above the wound and not on the joint. Make it tight. We turn the little bar until it is super tight and we have no more distal pulses. We secure the bar, and then we write the time that we applied this tourniquet to the bar. That's going to be important in the hospital settings when they believe it's time to release it. If one tourniquet does not work, we can apply a second one even further proximal to the body. So a couple of inches above the last one. Same technique. Once we apply a tourniquet, we don't take it off. So tourniquets are used on extremities. Another technique that we can use anywhere on the body, and different systems have different protocols for this, is packing the wound or using a hemostatic agent. This particular one is a type of bandage. It's got chemicals in there that bind blood and kind of gellify it and make it clot faster. We would just kind of like a bandage. If the wound is deep, we can kind of peel some of these apart. Some systems use a powder. Kind of fold it, put it into the wound, fill the wound as well as we can. And then we apply our bulky dressing on top of that hemostatic agent, and again tie it off with a cravat or some sort of bandage. You can also do this to abdominal wounds and chest wounds and back wounds. So that's for blood that we can see. If we have a suspicion that the patient is bleeding inside the body, even though the blood is in the body, it's not in the vessels getting to the tissues, we need to take steps to control that. A major source of internal bleeding is the pelvic fractures. Most systems have like a pelvic binder. This is a commercial one. We don't want to put it up here at the waistline. We want to put it way down low at the hips, kind of where the femur hits the pelvis bone. Just apply. This is pretty easy. We wrap it around, we pull it tight, and then we secure it. If your system doesn't have a commercial pelvic binder, you can do the same with a sheet. I would make sure I put it on the stretcher before I put the patient on there. Take the sheet ends up around, tie it. Sometimes you can put a broomstick in the middle, tie it again, and twist the broomstick to apply tension to the pelvis, closing any open fractures and reducing bleeding. Other fractures that can bleed a lot are femur fractures. You can use items such as a traction splint to reduce femur fractures to control bleeding. So once we have our bleeding controlled and we've addressed those issues, then we go back to our regular ABCs, airway and breathing. First step is to make sure the patient has an open airway, so we can use a jaw thrust if we think there's some kind of cervical problems, or a little head tilt chin lift to open the airway. We can also use other adjuncts such as oral airway devices if the patient is unconscious. If the patient's conscious and doesn't have any kind of facial fractures, we can use a nasal airway device to keep the airway patent. Another technique we can use to keep the airway patent is to clear it with suction. We got a hard tip suction. We look in the airway. If there's blood, vomit, quickly suction, 5 to 10 seconds, sweeping back and forth, and clear the airway that way. Once the airway is clear, we got to check for breathing. We'll listen to lung sounds, make sure they are clear, if they have wheezing, if they have any kind of fluid in the lungs. If the patient is breathing too fast or too slow, my personal goal is if they're breathing less than 10 times a minute or more than about 24, 25 times a minute, I assist them in ventilations. So, good old-fashioned bag valve mask, open the airway, and squeeze the bag once every 10 seconds. If the patient is breathing on their own in a normal rate, then we just apply standard high-flow oxygen, non-rebreathing mask, to maximize the amount of oxygen that's in the blood, so when that blood gets to the tissues, it has enough oxygen to sustain homeostasis. Other things are kind of disability things. If we believe the patient is having in a traumatic event, we want to make sure their C-spine is stabilized. So we do a C-collar. This patient's already on the backboard. So once the patient neurological problems are taken care of, we start thinking about positioning. The preferred position for anybody in shock is flat. You may have seen people raise the legs in order to get more blood flow to the head and the vital organs, but that also causes increased pressure on the diaphragm. It makes breathing harder. So to maximize the amount of oxygen getting to the blood, keep your patients flat. The only time you would change their position is if their chest, you can hear it, is full of fluid or blood, and then you can raise the head of the patient slightly to a more anatomically correct position, and that decreases the pressure on the diaphragm and gives you more lung expansion. Now, if our patient is pregnant, especially late pregnancies, we'll roll them onto their left side. We'll roll them onto their left side. This gets the fetus off of the vena cava and increases blood return to the heart. You can also kind of stick a pillow under there. It doesn't have to be a 90-degree angle, just 40, 45 degrees to get some of the pressure off the vena cava. Also, if your patient is vomiting, the left lateral recumbent position, same thing as you use with a pregnant patient. It's great because it keeps the stomach lower than the mouth and decreases the chances of regurgitation or vomiting by the patient. And the less the patient vomits, the less likely they are to occlude their airway, aspirate something to occlude their airway. Next things we want to do are specific to distributive shock, like sepsis, some sort of infection, and allergic reactions, anaphylaxis. With any shock patient, you want to keep them warm. Hypothermia leads to poor coagulopathy, which means bleeding. So if your patient is cold, they are more likely to bleed. So make sure after you remove their wet clothing that you either cover them in a couple of blankets, some sort of emergency foil device, and keep the inside of your ambulance warm. As far as anaphylaxis, again, sit the patient up to help their breathing status, make them more anatomically correct for breathing. As EMTs, there are a couple of things we can do with anaphylaxis. Usually the patient knows they're allergic to something, they may have an EpiPen. So we can treat anaphylaxis with an EpiPen to the lateral thigh. And also we can use albuterol. Most systems let EMTs administer albuterol, and we would do it just like we would for someone in asthma. This opens up the bronchioles. The more open the bronchioles are, the more air that can get in, the more air, more oxygen to the blood cells, and therefore more oxygen to tissues in the body. A couple of things we will probably have to call ALS on, and we need to make this decision as soon as possible, is if you're listening to lung sounds and you don't have any lung sounds on one side and the other side does have air moving, that means they probably have a tension or a pneumothorax on the silent side. Then you'll need needle decompression. Most systems, this is an ALS skill. Some VLS providers may be able to do it. And it's a simple needle into the chest in a specific spot to release the trapped air on that side of the body, and makes that lung expand. So now they can utilize both lung fields for gas exchange. Other things ALS can do is give IV fluids to replace the volume that may have been lost in any kind of internal or external bleeding. Also, they can give vasopressors, which are medications which can squeeze blood vessels to increase blood pressure and increase the perfusion of blood, oxygen, insulin to the tissues. There's also a couple of other medications they can give things to make the heart beat stronger in case the person's in cardiogenic shock. So to recap, first thing is scene size up. We need to figure out if this is a medical emergency or a trauma emergency. Our regular ABCD steps to assess patients really go, or treat patients really goes to a CBCD steps. We control bleeding with the C, as I said before, direct pressure, tourniquets, packing our wound, reducing fractures. Airway is next. We can use physical maneuvers such as a jaw thrust or a chin lift to open the airway. We can use devices such as OPAs or NPAs to keep our airway patent. Next is breathing. We want to assist with ventilations if they're too fast or too slow. If the patient's got a normal ventilatory rate and we do suspect shock, we want to give them supplemental oxygen with a non-rebreather mask. Next is disability. If we do think there's some kind of trauma going on, make sure you maintain C-spine precautions, apply C-collar, and place the patient on the backboard. From there, we want to keep the patient warm, because again, hypothermia leads to poor coagulopathy, which increases bleeding. Also, positioning the patients, remember that flat is best. Never raise the legs above the heart. And if the patient has some sort of respiratory distress, you can raise the head 20, 30 degrees to facilitate better oxygen movement. Pregnant patients and anybody that's vomiting should be in the left lateral recumbent position. There are some targeted treatments to certain types of shock, mainly distributive shock. If people are sepsis, we make sure that they are extra warm. If they have an anaphylaxis, we can give an EpiPen. We can apply non-rebreather mask, or albuterol nebulizer treatment to them. And then quickly, in the first 10 minutes, we need to make sure that we are deciding if this is a BLS or ALS transport, call for additional resources if we believe the patient needs some kind of IV fluids, medications to increase blood pressure, or if they need an advanced technique such as the needle decompression of the chest, or eventually intubation. Shock, is a state of severe tissue hyperperfusion, and that is going to lead to cellular death, which leads to organ death, which eventually leads to person death. BLS maneuvers can stabilize a patient. BLS maneuvers save lives. ALS maneuvers get people to the hospital faster. So by all means, in the first 10 minutes, decide if you are going to take the patient to the hospital or if you need more advanced equipment and personnel on scene to manage your patient. This particular training video doesn't replace any kind of protocols that you have in place. Please be familiar with all the equipment that you guys use, because it's probably different than what I use today. Again, these handouts are for you. It is a quick ABCD steps to managing your patient in shock. Again, my name is Chris Pleasant, and thank you for viewing this demonstration.